I believe that health care should be a right, not a privilege. In the state of Florida, everyday working people, middle-class people, should not be one illness away from bankruptcy. My name is Andrew Gillum, and as governor, I'll expand Medicaid for over 800,000 working people, protect Floridians with pre-existing conditions, and protect Medicare for all of our seniors. Together, we can make health care affordable for all. Let's bring it home, Florida.
That early morning, I strap in to a rocket that weighs 4.5 million pounds. We slid by the steel of the launch tower. I looked back at Earth. I didn't see religious divisions. I didn't see political divisions. I didn't see racial divisions. What I saw is we're all in this together. And if we just remember that, we'd get a lot more done. I'm Bill Nelson, and I approve this message.
10% of the population of Florida has had their right to vote taken away. That's 1.7 million people who can't vote because they have a felony conviction.
You know, statistically, man, 1 out of every 4 blacks, males, gonna either be incarcerated. And, you know, poverty and where you live at have a lot to do with it. In this neighborhood alone, it's probably like 1 out of every 3 people gonna end up in jail.
What would it mean for you to get your rights back, to be able to vote?
It'll mean the world, but I can actually do something about it by punching in the ballot, you know?
Yeah.
Do you know Amendment 4 is to restore voting rights to individuals? It's time to let my people vote. This is a bipartisan issue. It is not black, it's not white, it's not Republican, it's not Democrat. It is a basic American value, our basic right as guaranteed by the Constitution as a citizen of the United States.
That's our reporter, Tremaine Lee, who's covering the Amendment 4 issue right here in Florida. You can watch that full report this week on AM Joy right here on MSNBC. In 34 days, millions of Floridians could regain their right to vote. Amendment 4, which is on the ballot, would automatically restore voting rights to felons, with the exception of murderers and sex offenders who have completed their sentences. Now, it needs 60% of the vote to pass. Felons haven't been able to vote in Florida for 150 years, ever since the aftermath of the Civil War, when black people were granted the right vote, and white Floridians responded by adopting a constitution in 1868 that disenfranchised anyone with a felony conviction and added to the felony roster a variety of crimes they believed African Americans were likelier to be convicted of. Earlier today, I sat down with John Legend and 2 Florida residents who cannot vote in November and are urging their fellow Floridians to go to the polls and restore their voting rights. All right, so we're here with John Legend, Neil Foles, and Desmond Meade, who are organizers with the Amendment 4 campaign. I thought maybe, Desmond, if you could tell us a little bit about how you came to this issue.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Chris. Back in 2005, I found myself standing in front of railroad tracks waiting on the train to come so I can jump in front of it. I was homeless, I was addicted to drugs, recently released from prison, and I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. I was ready to end my life. But the train didn't come that day, thank God, and I crossed those tracks and I checked myself into drug treatment. And after completing drug treatment, I moved into a homeless shelter. And while there, I decided to go back to school. And I did extremely well. And eventually, I was accepted into law school. And in May of 2014, I graduated with a law degree. However, in spite of overcoming all of those obstacles, I still can't even practice law in Florida because my rights have not been restored. And then even the last election cycle, my wife, when she ran for office, I couldn't even vote for her.
You can't practice law, you can't vote, despite all of the changes that you've made to your life.
That's right. That's right. And that's because Florida is one of 3-4 states that permanently disenfranchises its citizens. And as a result, we have people in Puerto Rico, prisoners in Puerto Rico, voting, but I can't vote here. People all over this country, in states like Texas and South Carolina and Georgia, that are able to vote. But because I live in Florida, I'm told I could never have my voice heard.
It's basically permanent, right? I mean, and it's the biggest chunk of people. It's 1.6 million people, right? How about you, Neil? How'd you get involved in this?
Well, 12 years ago, I got a felony conviction, and I got it the old-fashioned way. I earned it. I made some stupid decisions. I crossed some lines I shouldn't have crossed, and I was selfish and arrogant at the time.
And this is in Washington, part of sort of a corruption lobbying prosecution.
That's right. Yeah, I was involved in politics for over a decade. And
Republican staffer.
Republican staffer, chief of staff, and it blew up my life, man. It changed my life a whole lot. I suddenly became radioactive, and I moved to Florida and just searching for something new. And bit by bit, I started to see exactly what Desmond saw, which is I started putting my life together. I got very involved in helping people with opioid addictions and working at a church, and ultimately I became the chairman of our local homeless coalition, where we're spending millions of taxpayer dollars and making decisions that help people in our community. And you begin to think to yourself, like, well, if I can do that, if I can pay taxes and I can make these kind of decisions, why is there a lid on my ability to fully participate in the community? And so we ended up meeting together, and we've been working ever since.
The rest is history.
It's a dream team. I love it.
Well, and you were making the point before about that argument, right? Which is if someone's paid their debt to society, right? I mean, these are people that, in this case, people that they're not in prison currently, right?
Yeah.
They finished their sentence, they finished probation, like. If you go to someone and you say, "Why shouldn't that person vote?" It's hard. It's hard to argue against.
Yeah, it's hard to argue against them voting. And like I said before, 75% of the felons in Florida didn't even do something serious enough to get prison time. Right. So if there's 75% of them we deemed not even prison worthy for that, surely we can't punish them for the rest of their lives and say they can't vote.
You guys have put together a really interesting coalition. This is polling at 75-25, which blows my mind right now. Tell me about what the coalitional politics in terms of where you guys are coming from has been like.
Wow. So I love it. And I think part of the reason is that, listen, we are an organic grassroots effort that is comprised of people from all walks of life.
This didn't come down from somewhere else.
No,
you made this.
This came right, you're looking at it. Right?
You guys went out and got the signatures.
Listen, we went out, total grassroots, no money, strictly volunteer from Pensacola to Key West, run across people like Neil, myself, from all spectrums, and they came together, and I think that's the beauty of it. Sometimes even when we look at the aftermath of hurricanes, what we see are people coming together. No one is caring how the other person voted in the last election. No one is caring about the color of their skin. They're seeing another human being in need, and that is what has really held this campaign together. That's been at the very beginning, that we are organizing along the lines of humanity, and that allows us to transcend partisan politics. It allows us to transcend the racial divide. It allows us to be a shining example of what good can be in this country when people come together.
There's a certain rhetoric about crime, tough on crime, right? And you see people talk about it even today, right? People running ads right now. These are crooks. These are bad people. What did your mind change? Did you have a sort of worldview shift when you actually went through being convicted?
Well, you know what? Going through the process that I went through did teach me a whole lot. And I think that that's one of the things that we see is that every once in a while you find somebody who has a reaction to what we're doing. But what we found is we've got this 20-minute and a cup of coffee rule. Like if I can get 20 minutes and a cup of coffee with somebody, you can get them to support Amendment 4 because it's common sense stuff. It actually helps create safer communities. It helps families get together. It helps create job growth in the state. And so, yeah, I do think that there was a piece of it that I did learn, but we're learning constantly, hopefully all of us are. So my experience with the criminal justice system definitely had a role in me understanding that when you allow somebody to reintegrate into the community, you're actually lowering crime and lowering reoffense rates.
What's interesting to me about this law is that it's a perfect example of, the origins of it are in race, explicitly. It's a Jim Crow law. It's meant to disenfranchise African Americans, but it's a great example on how laws that are designed to do that also have widespread destructive effects across
I've always said it's like a cancer or a tumor. If you ignore it long enough, it's going to spread to other parts of the body. And that's what it's done here. In Florida, only a third of people who are impacted look like me. Overwhelming majority, guess what, Chris? They look more like you, right? People who can't vote, people who have served their time, they paid their debt. At the end of the day, there's two principles, I think, that we hold on to with vigor. Number one is when the debt is paid, it's paid.
It's paid.
And then number two is that basic concept of forgiveness that's inside of each and every one of us. Because I haven't found anyone yet who would raise their hand and say, I don't ever want to be forgiven for anything that I've ever done, ever. And so those two things right there has allowed organizations like the Christian Coalition and even some of the Coke industry partners to
get on
cross
board.
these lines and get on board because it is the right thing to do.
And I think part of the issue with all of these issues with folks returning from prison and people who have committed crimes before, we have to realize they're not those people over there. They're not some separate species from us. These are our family members. I have family family members that have committed crimes. I have family members that have gone through the criminal justice system. Everybody here does. And so these are our family members. When they come out of the system, we want them to be able to work. We want them to be able to take care of their family. We want them to be able to participate in society so they don't go back to crime. And one of the ways they participate is by voting. And so let's bring our family back together.
Right.
Let's have everybody be part of the community, and let's let them have their voice heard in the democracy.
You guys are not going to be able to vote on Election Day, by definition.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to be doing on Election Day?
Wow, listen, let me tell you, we have an amazing grassroots effort that not only has gotten us to this point, but is going to get us across the finish line. And that's one of the reasons that Mr. Legend is even here, because we're encouraging people that even though they can't vote, they have at least 10 family members or friends, loved ones, who can go and vote on their behalf. And so we have Bring 10 to Win, you know, and for our allies, Bring 4 for 4.
So folks that are part of your movement that are themselves disenfranchised, who do have felony records, for them to go out and work as organizers.
4 million people, they can bring family members to the polls to vote on behalf of them. Vote along the lines of love. That's what this campaign is about, right? Not fear, but love. Not exclusion, but inclusion. And so we're going to have people from all walks of life, whether they're conservative, whether they're independent, whether they're Democrat, whether they're white, black, young, or old, that's going to be bringing people to the polls to vote on their behalf.
And I think there's a certain harmony to that, because that's where it started. Right at the heartbeat of this movement are people who are returning citizens, people who are working through the criminal justice system and dealing with the system that doesn't work. And it's their family and their friends who are the ones that went out and collected petitions. It's their family and friends who have been the clarion call in their neighborhoods and their churches and their communities. And so for me, I mean, my wife and I are going to go, she's going to vote, and I'm going to cajole and scream and yell, and anybody and everyone. I'm baking cookies for the whole neighborhood if they come out and vote.
I got to say, I think what you guys are doing down here is one of the most important political stories in the country, honestly. I mean, and not for a bunch of reasons, but also because of how it came about. I mean, this was actual, the rawest kind of citizen mobilization. So it's really, really great for you guys to take some time. Thank you very much.
Well, listen, we appreciate being on the show with you.
We are back here in Orlando, Florida, just 34 days before these midterms. We're here in a Hooch bar where I will probably be partaking after this is done. I want to talk to some folks here. Your name is George, right?
Yes, Chris.
George, how zoomed in are you on this election, these midterms?
Pretty zoomed in. I would say I've got 3 daughters, 2 who are in college and can vote now, and are very interested in what they're going to do for education as far as the candidates, healthcare, and just the general tone and tenor of our politics nowadays.
How much are you got 2 very, very tightly contested statewide races, obviously governor and Senate. I wonder how much like the national political atmosphere is playing on over that, or how much sort of local Florida issues?
So we see that, but there's a lot that's going on. The red tide and the algae is huge. Healthcare is huge. Education is huge. So those are the things that we're looking for those candidates to really talk about.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Sure.
Christina, right?
Yes.
Where are you in terms of that? What he just said, the red tide seems like it's been a really big issue down here.
Oh, of course.
And something that's not a national issue, but very much matters to Floridians.
It is so specific to Florida. It is a really big deal. We need people in office that are going to help protect our environment for the future.
You guys, the red tide, big issue?
Sure.
And what do you think about this gubernatorial race? A lot of people watching outside Florida have it as this kind of like proxy battle between these 2 visions of American politics in this moment.
I mean, that's cool, but personally, I've been in Florida my whole life, and this is the first time I've ever been super thrilled to cast a vote. And
for Andrew Gillum, you mean?
Of course. And
I don't know.
I'm 29 years old. I have crippling student loan debt. I live with bipolar. I'm a woman. There are a lot of reasons that I need to be at the polls this November, and I'm really excited to be a part of this moment.
Awesome. And MJ, right?
Yes, you got it.
Real quickly,
right.
How invested are you? Scale 1 to 10. How much are you paying attention?
11.5. This is the point now that we're going to determine exactly how many people are paying attention to what happened in 2016. And getting out now is going to be super important, especially since we can, shift the Senate.
Yep.
We only need a couple seats, 2 seats?
2 seats, yeah,
so.
for Democrats. All right, thank you all. That does it for All In this evening. Here from Orlando, the Rachel Maddow Show starts right now. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Chris. Well done, my friend. Hello, Orlando. Great job tonight, man. That's fascinating.